If you want to start with the
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to our December 8th meeting tonight. If you would all like to stand, we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for 10 seconds of silence. You may be seated. As we welcome you in person at this virtual Indian Rock Beach City Commission meeting, which is convened pursuant to the executive orders issued by the Office of Governor Ron DeSantis, allowing local government bodies to conduct meetings of
of their governing boards without having a quorum of its members present physically or at any specific location, and utilizing communication media technology such as telephonic or video conferencing as provided by section 120.54 5B2 Florida statute. At this time, I'm going to have Matt introduce himself and begin our meeting, and then once you have finished, Matt, we'll do the roll call.
Good afternoon. I'm going to ask that when the city clerk begin already calling each member of the Indian Rock Beach Nation, that you individually confirm that you're here, are able to hear us, and can respond. Please note that everyone but the commission chambers is currently on mute. I can request that you're unmuted via the internet. However, I will not be able to unmute you myself, so you'll have to do that.
Ian?
Mayor Cookie Kennedy,
Here.
Vice Mayor Phil Hanna,
Here.
Commissioner Diane Class, who is appearing virtually today,
Here.
Commissioner Edward Nagel,
Here.
Commissioner Joe McCall.
Here.
Members of the city commission are here and accounted for.
Matt?
I'll then ask for each of the virtual folks that are attending remotely that when you wish to speak, that you use either the chat function or you raise your hand by using the three dots in the bottom of the participants menu. You should be able to hit raise hand. I will see a blue icon and then I can address you.
With that, we're going to go to our presentations tonight. And our first presentation will be from my good friend Wick Latin, who is the Executive Director of Ford Pinellas. And if you want to come forward with, who's going to tell you a little bit about the legislative agenda coming up.
Thank you, Mayor.
Hi.
Is it okay if I use
Yes,
this
sir.
for the presentation? Well, every year I go around to as many local governments that will happen in Pinellas County to give them an update on our focus for the coming year. And it's timely now that we talk a little bit about legislative priorities and priorities. So that's what I'm here to talk about today. First, I just want to start with a reminder about our role as the Metropolitan Planning Organization for Pinellas County. One of our main jobs is to bring state and federal funds for transportation projects into the community for projects that are needed. And so this year we issued our first ever call for projects for our major transportation project grant programs. And we had a staggered list of when those applications were due. The little graphic on the screen shows that we had a call for project in July, and then different programs were due through December 11th. The committee is in the process of reviewing those applications, and we will be bringing the recommendation to the board in March 2020. Next slide. And I'm just going to quickly touch on some of these programs. We adopted our Advantage Pinellas Long Range Plan in 2019 that looks out to 2045 for the community. And it's really focused on several things: improving traffic flow and congestion, creating safer streets in Pinellas County, and enhancing transit connections, all kind of wrapped around our land use goals of guiding growth to the right places and in the right scale and in the right character. And then preserving those areas that we don't want to see a lot of change happen, or protecting the character of the environment in a given area. And providing housing that's affordable. That's a big challenge we have in our county, preserving employment and industrial land uses for highway shops. So it all works together in our framework. Next slide, please. So the first major project area of funding is our multimodal projects priority list. And this is the basis for the Florida Department of Transportation's 5-year work program in an urban area like ours. These are larger projects. You can see the minimum size of a project is about $350,000. But some of the projects on this list are over $1 million, or over $100 million, in fact. And we've limited it to only 3 applications per local government. Several years ago, one of our larger cities submitted about 10. And we want to make sure they're geographically balanced. This considers all those, and they're evaluated against the criteria that support Governor Pinellas' goals. And the next slide shows those: improving safety, mobility, fostering economic growth, enhancing equity, protecting the environment, increasing the resilience of our vulnerable coastline. The next program is our Transportation Alternatives Program, or TA. This is a federal program where we have money directly from the federal government for eligible projects that include bicycle safety, pedestrian, and non-auto transportation projects. This is really about infrastructure, not operations, and the prerequisites in this program that we have to have local commitment, which makes sense, 100% of the right-of-way or the easement for the right-of-way, and then this is a tough one for smaller communities, but the Florida Department of Transportation requires that if these funds are passed through, you have to be local agency certified or LAP certified, and that only really applies to some of our larger agencies, but the county has been good about working in partnership with some of our local governments, such as Indian Rocks Beach, if you don't have that certification. I don't believe it. The next major program is our Complete Streets program. This is the 5th year of this program, and it really ties land use and transportation together to look at streets that need a makeover to support redevelopment goals in the community. Next slide. And over the almost 5 years we've had this program, we've awarded $4 million in construction projects and about $500,000 in concept planning. Those are the two main categories. The concept planning comes out of our planning dollars, and that needs to be spent within a year. The construction dollars go into the 5-year work program and are added to the new 5th year of that work program. Similar criteria as the Transportation Alternatives Program, but a stronger land use connection and a linkage to redevelopment. Next slide. So I'm going to talk a little bit about legislative earmarks and why they can pose problems. Next slide, please. Legislative earmarks have been popular in a lot of local governments throughout Florida because they circumvent sometimes the difficult process of getting your project funded, especially for transportation, that has to go through reviews and get on a long list and work its way to the top. A lot of communities over the years have used legislative earmarks to reach out to a legislator and to get something added to the budget and then approved by the governor. The problem we have with earmarks is that they don't grow the funding pie. It's not new money, so it comes out of the Transportation Trust Fund, and even if you try to bring it out of the general fund, once it goes into the legislative committee process, it's really hard to change that direction, and it's considered a transportation project. What we've seen happen is that earmarked local projects force other party projects out of the queue that have been working their way steadily to the top. And then if the governor vetoes the earmarked project, that money is gone from the budget, so it doesn't come back. It doesn't get reallocated. It's just lowering the budget. The Department of Transportation is prohibited from working on that project if it's been vetoed. So let's say, for example, they're in the midst of design and you get money for right-of-way acquisition, and the governor vetoes the money for right-of-way acquisition. DOT stops work on the design for you, so it can set you back on your project. And then earmark can only be for one phase of a project, so you can't say I need an earmark for design and construction. And we had an issue in Clearwater not long ago when I first got here, where PSTA asked for an earmark, was granted a $1 million earmark to design a busway over the Memorial Causeway Bridge, and Clearwater wasn't happy with the design. What we really needed were planning dollars to kind of work out those issues, and that money ended up going nowhere. So that was, to me, that was a waste of money. Next slide, please. So in last year's budget, we had a goodwill earmark for our Regional Transit Authority, and that was $1 million they didn't ask for, but the legislator thought they needed it. And that ended up coming out of PSTA's budget for their downtown Park Street terminal in Clearwater. And we have another earmark in Hillsborough County that eliminated 5 other safety projects that DOT had planned upon. So if there are unintended consequences. Go ahead, next slide, please. So what we ask you to do is, if you're thinking about earmark, and this is my message to all the local governments, is reach out to us and we can work with you on finding possibly other forms of funding. The Safe Routes to Schools program is not one we control, but we can have influence. The Highway Safety Improvement Program is another one that we can influence the Department of Transportation on that by giving them data and analysis to support that. So just work with us and we can help the earmark problem maybe go away. Next slide, please. The challenge with earmarks is that it really means getting the language right and knowing what you're looking for. And connecting the dots. And sometimes we can identify an even better funding source than what your earmark might accomplish. So this comes back to legislative priorities, and I'll just go into that. So our board has not yet adopted these. These will be presented in January for approval, but they've been recommended by our legislative committee. And Mayor, you start on that. I'm going to go through each of these pretty quickly, so I won't dwell on this slide. Let's go to the first one. Protecting trust funds. And we developed these priorities from a lot of outreach with our partners across the county and the state. And we really are focusing on protecting those trust funds that are money allocated for specific purposes. The Sadowski Affordable Housing Program and the Transportation Trust Fund are routinely, in lean budget years, swept by the legislature and taken from those purposes into the general fund. And when that happens, that takes down the opportunity to do affordable housing, which is a real challenge in our county, and to do transportation projects. The next one is supporting flexible and sustained transportation funding. I won't read all this, but the short of it is, an urban area like Pinellas County needs a little more flexibility in how we use the Transportation Trust Fund dollars, because a lot of them are earmarked for projects that only add capacity to the highway system, or that are limited to certain roadways, such as on the strategic intermodal system. And we only have 3 roads on that system: I-275, US 19, or the new Gateway Expressway. And that leaves the balance of our state roads for a relatively small share of funding. And most of the funding for those have to show a capacity improvement, not a safety or another accessibility improvement. And we're just not adding that many lanes to our roadways. So when we looked at our long-range plan, we found that we had $400 million that was projected to come to Pinellas County that we could not spend. We could not fund projects for over the next 25 years because of the inflexibility in that program. And that's just one example. There are a lot of other examples, and we just adopted a position statement for transit funding that asks for increased flexibility, because that is one of the more constrained sources of funding. Next slide, please. The top one is supporting safety for all users of our transportation network. And this is really touching 2 things. One is texting while driving. We did get some legislation passed last year, but it's pretty limited and could go a little bit further. The other one is the rectangular rapid flashing beacons that you have up and down the boulevard and throughout Pinellas County. We had a hostile piece of legislation that I'll cover in a moment that threatened to remove all of those. And that's a local safety decision, and we don't think that should be dictated by Tallahassee. Similarly, maintaining the MPO authority, that's a lot of words there just to say that the federal government set up the framework for agencies like ours, and we get to decide at the local level who serves on that board based on population, based on the county demographics, and we don't think that ought to be dictated by Tallahassee either. They have threatened over the years to merge our MPO with Chasco and Hillsborough to create a regional MPO. And while there may be some merits to that, that ought to be a local decision rather than something that Tallahassee dictates to us. Next slide, please. And I've been told that I probably ought to change the word home rule because that makes the legislators go crazy in Tallahassee. It's kind of a trigger word, but maybe supporting local choices for local communities or something like that. But the idea, whether it's vacation rentals or those rectangular rapid flashing beacons or how we structure our MPO, is that Tallahassee likes to tell local governments what they can and can't do. Sometimes because of one bad case in one city out of 400 across the state, and they ignore all the good things that are happening, but then they pass a blanket piece of legislation that affects everybody. So we really want to send that message that local communities know what's best for them. They operate within the law by and large, and I don't think there's any real bad cases of malfeasance, so let's not legislate by your hip pocket of identifying one bad apple and saying everybody else gets thrown out too.
Amen.
You say it a lot better than I do. You get a lot more passion in you about those issues. Supporting state and federal assistance with addressing the effects of COVID-19. This covers a lot of things, but most notably at the federal level is the CARES Act. That program funding is running out. Congress is talking about some renewals, but also it's very cumbersome to get through that process and get the funding. So folks who were hoping to get the money by December needed to really apply back in October. And so we also recognize that meetings like this that can be held virtually in the time of an emergency, it would be nice to have some additional flexibility to have virtual meetings held under different circumstances, because the participation levels we've seen has been fantastic. So we do have an ask for the legislature to consider some modest amendments to the Sunshine Law that would give some of our advisory committees, for instance, or maybe even our governing board, say 90 days after an emergency ends, because the governor has extended the state of emergency, allowing virtual meetings, for instance, like at 6 p.m. on Friday, when we've already paid for advertising. So there are some ways that we can improve that process. And then finally, our last point is Speaker Sprowls has made an issue of resilience and setting up a state funding program to assist with grants. We think that's a great idea. Resilience is a huge issue in our region, and we just want to see that effort go forward. Florida has been really kind of lagging on the resilience front over the last 8 years. I just want to dwell a little bit on the legislative battle we had last year that we were successful in overcoming. But there were 2 pieces of legislation, one in the House that passed the full chamber, and one in the Senate that made its last committee stop, that would have forced us to assess every one of those 400 rapid flashing beacons, not rapid, across Pinellas County, and look at either removing them or turning them into red flashing beacons, because red means stop. While that may be intuitive, these are governed by the Federal Highway Administration, and there's a different device for making them red. And if you drive on Park Boulevard going towards Pinellas Park, those devices have just been installed, and they force traffic to come to a complete stop until the time cycle ends, and then they can go. These are a nice balance, because they're flashing when you're in the crosswalk. Cars are required legally to stop, so all it does is reinforce the law that says you have to stop for a pedestrian in the crosswalk, and then you can proceed once that pedestrian is out of your way. So there's less delay. These are also a lot cheaper to install, and they're only really recommended for roads that are 45 miles an hour or lower, or 4 lanes or fewer. And the other devices are better for Park Boulevard. They're 6 lane and 45 mile an hour roads. And these are really effective too. Next slide, please. So things we're monitoring in 2021, you all can read this list as well as I, but I just want to highlight a couple things. The City of St. Pete has looked at the potential broadening of the penny for Pinellas for affordable housing funding. There's a statutory limitation on that, and it can only be used for land acquisition and clearing the land, not to make buildings go vertical. So St. Pete is looking for support to broaden that. I don't know that they've got it. They do have sponsors. Senator Cooper and Representative Latvala are willing to work with us on this, but they want to see broader countywide support. And then the next major issue I want to bring to your attention is budget restrictions due to COVID-19. We are seeing a $1 billion cut in our transportation funding in District 7 in this current fiscal year. And unfortunately, what that means is some of our high priority projects are being put off for a long, long time. The I-275 improvements that are sorely needed for safety and mobility to link the Howard Franklin Bridge to downtown St. Petersburg has been pushed from 2025 to 2031. That has enormous regional ramifications, because now you're going to have the Howard Franklin Bridge complete, and you're going to have 6 lanes going into 3 at the West Shore Interchange, because the West Shore Interchange has been deferred by 2 years. And that was the #1 project in the region. We all came together, Hillsborough, Pasco, Pinellas, local governments across the region, and that funding was awarded by the governor last year. The sales tax and the gas tax revenues are down big time. And all the state of Florida can do is deliver a balanced budget. So there are some things that could affect that. If the legislature sweeps some of those funds this year to balance the budget, we'll be in for a worse situation. If Congress helps out with state and local relief for transportation, we'll be in a better situation. If the toll roads that are down through the rural areas are unfunded by the legislature, then that might help as well. And I forgot to mention there's a bunch of US 19 projects north of Clearwater that are also being taken out of the program. So we've had some setbacks on US 19 as well. I will say that District 7 has been very good about funding our local priorities with the discretion that they have at the district level. but Tallahassee is responsible for these cuts. And I think it upsets our secretary here in District 7, Secretary Gwynn, as much as it does me. But I do want to be real with you that transportation funding is going to be a challenge for the next 5 to 6 years, because they're saying it will take 5 to 6 years before we come back to where we should be with the work program and do the program. So with that, I'm here to answer any questions you might have and see if there's anything I can do to be of service.
Anyone have a question for Fred? Diane Flagg, I know you're out there. Do you have any questions for Whit Lynn?
No, Mayor, nothing.
Whit, thank you for coming. You didn't mention about our new waterborne transportation. Come.
Well, that wasn't really on my topic to talk about, but I'm really happy that we had our first meeting, and we're going to have our second meeting on December 18th.
Cool.
And it looks like you've got Congressman Chris 95% going to be there. And we are going to be looking at ways to expand and sustain our waterborne network of ferries and water taxis. Right now, it's sort of Clearwater and Dunedin, and we'd like to see the whole coastal benefit.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you for letting me go first.
Okay.
Y'all have a good meeting.
Okay, with that, David Ardman, who is our fire commissioner with Pinellas Suncoast Fire and Rescue, he has a report on file. Is David on Zoom tonight, just asking? He's not on, okay. He wanted me to mention that a lovely Indian Rocks Beach resident dropped off a check at my shop for $1,000 for the fire department. We presented it to the fire department, and they are going to use the money they told us for a piece of apparatus for each one of the firemen. And I thought that was pretty cool. So thanking our resident that participated, and they sent her a little note. She stopped in today. And I appreciate the fact that she asked me to present it to them. So I wanted to mention that. And with that, we will now go to public comment. We have 3 minutes for speaker. Any member of the audience may come forward and give his or her name, address, and state any comment or concern that she or he may have regarding any matter over which the City Commission has control, excluding any agenda items that are on for tonight. All statements made to the City Commission shall be made to the City Commission as a whole, not directly to any City Commission member, and no personal or slanderous remarks shall be permitted. No speaker shall be interrupted, and no debate shall take place between the speakers and the City Commission. And with that, I'm Nancy. You are our first speaker tonight.
Hi, I'm Nancy Oborski, 708 Beach Trail, number B, Indian Rocks. The single most important issue facing Indian Rocks Beach right now is getting beach renourishment for 2024. The Army Corps of Engineers is requiring 100% of 461 beachfront owners to give up rights to the land that we own beyond our seawall out to the erosion control. And for me, that's about 25 feet. Less than half have signed. It's 47.5% as of this morning, to be precise, and that's after multiple requests. New signatures at a virtual standstill, only 4 more have signed over the last 3 months, and that's not just Indian Rocks, that's from Sand Key all the way down to Redington. At last week's meeting of the beach community mayors, where Mayor Kennedy was present, Pinellas County announced that they'd be sending out yet another mailing in hopes of getting more signatures. I just can't imagine why anyone in their right mind would spend more taxpayer money on paper, ink, and postage when they had to get from 47.5% to 100% before we get into sand. And the bigger question for you as a commission is, how will you justify not trying to stop the county from fleecing more of our beachfront owners out of their property rights at this junction, knowing full well, right now as we stand here, there is zero chance that we're going to get 100% of those signatures. And anyone that signs after tonight or after now is giving up rights for absolutely not 1 grain of sand. Unfortunately, I think Charlie Crist's argument in his recent letter pleading our case to the Army Corps wasn't really that helpful. He hung his hat on the argument that that the Corps shouldn't be asking us for easements for areas that they're not going to put any sand in 2024. Unfortunately, those of us that have been involved in this issue pretty heavily since 2017 know that the Army Corps has already debunked that. They don't care about rights for 2024. They're more concerned about a catastrophic event. So actually the argument he used kind of fell flat, and I think he missed a golden opportunity, probably because he didn't have the right information to present a more compelling argument to the Corps. I have 6 copies of an article I'm going to leave called "The Army Corps of Engineers Has Become a Rogue Agency." And I'm hoping that when you read this, you'll see that it's not the beachfront owners that are the bad guys here. And we quite honestly have been portrayed that way. It seems the Corps spends more time fighting lawsuits and with all their overreach to overreach than they do building bridges these days. Lately, I've recently seen an inkling, especially at the county level, for some pushback finally against the Army Corps, which is encouraging. But I fear this change of focus may be too late, now that the Army Corps woke up last week and decided that the deadline is no longer spring of 2021, it's the end of this year in a few weeks. So we all have the same thing, sand, but it's time to acknowledge that getting more signatures isn't the means to the end. Thank you.
Anyone else would like to come up to this topic? Hi, Dr. Maggie.
Hi, can you? Thank you. Good evening. Dr. Maggie about me, 101 Rush. I'm here tonight to talk to you about the IRB pickleball courts and the playing time that we currently have. Since last March and the year of COVID, following the shutdown of all the pickleball indoor facilities around us, the number of pickleball players that really start descending on our outdoor lobby increased a lot. It became very difficult for IRB residents like myself, my wife, and others who also are the taxpayers here to really have some quality playing. As you know, pickleball is one of the most growing sports among seniors and also young players as well. So the problem is really getting even worse these days with the arrival of smokers. We definitely welcome them, many of them are our friends, but they add a burden on the courts. If you drive by the courts in the morning, especially in the morning, you will always see 20 to 30 players sitting around, waiting for playing time. During COVID, it's a problem, because we can't maintain social distance. But other than that, there is also the waiting time. You could be waiting for 40 to 50 minutes to play a game of 5 minutes. That was not the case last year and the year. So we need to find a solution. I can offer you multiple options. Some people would like to limit the court to be used by IRB residents only, or IRB residents and couple guests. Another option that I'd like to offer to you is to assign some dedicated time only on Monday and Thursday, only 2 days a week. Assign some dedicated time between 4 to 6 p.m. in winter and 5 to 7 p.m. in summer, so a smaller group of IRB women and men can enjoy this game without much interruption from outside players. The third option could be to look at increasing the number of the dedicated pickleball courts. We have 2 dedicated pickleball courts, and we have 2 courts on the tennis courts, lined with tennis courts. However, if you look around, you will see people only want to play on the dedicated courts. They don't want to be chasing balls. If you're playing on the open tennis courts, you have to chase balls off. So we're asking the city to consider to increase the number of dedicated pickleball courts by taking one of the 2 tennis courts. We can easily, and with minimum cost, switch them to 3 pickleball courts side by side, separate them by electric poles. And I can be more than happy to talk to you more about it and to our city manager about it at the time. Some people will say that will increase the number of players attracted to our courts. Yes, it will. But if you have 5 courts, the turnaround of games will be very quick. You'll have more people playing and less waiting time for each one to play again. This is the case if you go up north to Norwood and Clearwater. We have 6 courts and we have over 50 players. But you don't feel that you're waiting for long because people go in and out and turn over the course. We really need the city corporation and London to work with us before turning this fun sports into a bigger problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Is there anyone else who'd like to come forward? Hi, John.
Okay. John House, 2104 Beach Trail. So I too want to talk about the beach easements. First of all, I want to thank Greg for forwarding the copy of letter Chris wrote to the in regard to the easement. The most important phrase that I found in there was he said, unfortunately, there was an understandable skepticism from property owners. And I think that is probably the biggest insight in this whole thing. There is a lot of skepticism from those of us that live on the beach, and it needs to be addressed. I haven't seen a whole lot addressing to the homeowners. We had the last conference that we had. We got to listen to 5 or 6 people expound with all their stuff about what was going on. But nobody asked us what we think. And we had 2 minutes each to say something, and it's not a round table where people can talk about what's going on. You know, these are things that we live on the beach, we know what's going on, and we're very much concerned about it. So Cookie and I had a productive conversation about a month ago where, you know, the thing that failed in that conversation, or after that conversation, was that she had stated that some of the things in there were not right. You know, I know that there was a couple of things in there that I didn't personally agree with, but they were not legal issues. They were thoughts about living on the beach. If there are legal issues in the letter that was put out by a couple of attorneys that came to all of us that live on the beach, I would like to know what there are. I saw a quote from someone that worked at the county that said the same thing, that somebody was putting out negative, a derogatory letter about that. Well, what's negative? I mean, negative is a different point of view. If it's legally wrong, fine. I mean, but don't do the Donald Trump thing and just say it's a bunch of crap, and don't say what the crap is, okay? Answer what's wrong. Tell us what's wrong and what's in that letter. Tell us why we should do what we need to do, and then listen to us, and we can maybe solve this. But I don't know. It's gotten so far now that nobody wants to trust anybody. And like Cookie said before, says no one's going to come to the table. I think that's the saddest thing about this. People have to come to the table, have to solve this. I mean, and if it's not going to where the people that actually live on the beach, that actually have to sign these easements, if they're not included besides 2 minutes every month, it ain't going nowhere. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Is there anyone else who'd like to come forward at this time? not, we will close for public comment.
You check and see if
Is, Matt, could you check anyone who might be calling in?
Madam Mayor, if you have a speaker under one of the upcoming items on the agenda, I think it was item number 7. At this time, I see no participation. I just want to remind those that are joined, that 8 individuals that are online right now, you can either engage for speaking by using the chat option or using the up arrow next to participants and using the raise hand feature. At this time, Madam Mayor, I see no participation.
Thank you, Matt. At this time, would our city attorney, Amy Morrow, do you have a report for us?
No report, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Our city manager, Greg Mims.
Good evening. I just have a few quick things. At our last city commission meeting, we had quite a lengthy discussion about parking and where people should park and not park. One of the things that came up is President Diane Flag brought up was hiring resident spaces. And prior to the last meeting, we had reserved our spaces with the nature preserve, particularly in front of the dog park. We have reserved spaces at Cuban Player Park and the renovated park for the Boondocks. And obviously we have spaces at all the time with each access to be a part of it. We talked about this at work session in the company last week that we actually, after the 2014 meeting, had additional spaces at each access. But, yeah, I took to heart all the comments and about resident spaces where they are. As a result of that, I instructed staff to create dedicated parking spaces at 2 at Cole Park, 2 at Brown Park, and 2 at Kennedy Park. And the fact of the matter is, 99% of the year, you kind of need those parks and spaces. But there are some times, particularly because the state of that, which been able to us. So now, by the addition of those spaces, in those 3 different parks, we have at least a couple spaces there with city parks where roads and try to get in this spot. So I just want to thank you about that. And that brings, and we'll talk about this more later tonight, that brings to the grand total of resident spaces who off beach access to the park to 73. And we talk later about resident locales, one of the things that we did is, as part of capital budget, is we installed solar panels on City Hall and the museum, and those are activated and working now. In fact, the next thing we'll do is in the museum and the lobby of City Hall, there's like a computer screen there where in real time you can walk up and public and see what it's generating, what stage, that kind of thing. But generally, City Hall installation over a period of time will save us about 47% in energy costs and a reduction of 1,660 tons of CO2. The museum installation will result in a savings of about 87% and a reduction of about 300 tons of CO2. So that project is up and running. I want to thank the staff for the work that goes into the street parade. All I regret about that was the COVID world that we're living in right now. I saw a lot of little faces that were staring at me as the city manager, particularly the father and grandfather were waiting for their dying candy. And unlike other cities, decided not to have a parade at all when we made the city back to the road. So I'm like, next year we'll double up. The boat parade is it's looking like it's going to be pretty large this year. There's there again, due to COVID, there's some traditionally large boat parades or not, and that parade so we're going to be the beneficiary of so that's scheduled for December 19th. And the last, we did have a privilege to do that. I just want to say on behalf of all the employees of the city, the commission, and the public, wish y'all a Merry Christmas. This is a tough year out there and looking for the 2021 number to roll, and actually we'll have a better year. But I want to, and I say this particularly around budget time, but I think, more than ever, it's important to remember this. We live in a really special place, and I think most of us realize that. And as your manager, I've been here now for 7 years, whether it's this group of commissioners or different commissioners we've had on, you know, we'll have disagreements about things, we have discussions about what to do, how to do, when to do things. But I, as a manager, I appreciate the entire time I've been here, particularly the group that we have now, that although we may disagree, it's cordial, as one of the previous speakers just mentioned. You know, that's one of the things that's lacking in our country, is that people can sit down and figure it out. And that's one thing that we have here. And yeah, we probably would agree with the stories I told. I've been told many years ago that not a situation where the meetings that we invite and a lot of different things. We went and had a retaining door with city managers. And I just want to say, on behalf of myself, that I appreciate that. Because you do a lot of these things right here. And I'm always looking to ideas, suggestions, input. I don't have all the answers. I don't pretend to have them. You know, I've been in this business for a long time. I'm still kind of work motivated, kind of work, wanting to hear input from commission and the public. And we'll just continue to do really cool things here to make this place great. And thank you all for having the attention.
Anyone have any questions for the city manager at this time? Very good. Diane, do you have any questions?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. With that, we'll go to the city commission. Commissioner McCall, do you have any reports tonight?
Not at this time. Thank you.
Commissioner Hopkins, do you have any reports?
With respect to the beach stand, I think we'll never get agreement on the easements, and I think those of you who are traveling with that should realize that the Army Corps of Engineers does not want to encourage development on seaside areas, and if you find their actions to be overwhelming and in some ways discouraging, I think it's by design and strategy. I don't think it's coincidental. And it's an attempt by the planning agencies at the national level to discourage seaside development, and we are facing the brunt of that. And so I don't think that letters to the Army Corps of Engineers are going to solve that. That's it. Thank you.
Echo what Greg said, that I thank the city for assisting in putting on the street parade. It was really well attended. We had a lot of fun. And I also echo that it's been nice being on a commission for 12 years, that we have gotten along, and we're all here because no one has an agenda except one, and that's the city. And I think that's the important thing, and that's why we operate as efficiently as we do.
Thank you, Phil. Very nice comments from everyone. Just a couple things. Locally, it was great. I'd like to thank the staff and all of our residents. We've had a year. I'll just leave it at that. And I want to thank A2K and the homeowners for stepping up to the plate at the beginning of COVID and helping us with a project to help some of our citizens that had underlying conditions, and making sure that we could make sure that they had groceries, or if they needed medicine or incidentals. They helped me with that project. I'm forever grateful. And I know that it was about, I believe it was almost 30 people that they helped during the worst part, and I believe they're still helping. And I also wanted to bring up, Ed, could you mention a little bit about the A2K, the fundraiser that they're doing at the moment?
Well, the challenge.
The challenge.
The virtual challenge. So since we couldn't have an Oktoberfest, there was a desire to engage folks in a way of being active and raising money. And there's through the 10th of December, a virtual challenge. It's based on setting personal goals electronically and publishing those, and then competing with those against those goals to demonstrate some achievement, whether it's running or walking or doing other kinds of activities that can be measured. It's been a nice fundraiser. It's gotten people engaged in a much different way, and we're grateful to the new leadership at ACA for encouraging and developing.
Thank you for that. How about the homeowners? Is there anything, Joe, from homeowners for the rest of the year or beginning for next?
obviously Beach Fest is the largest fundraiser HUI has. So we'll see how that plays out next year.
November 29th was the year anniversary of Michael Lovely, Bob Nicola, who served the longest in this community, 12 years. And we had a tree planting for him as a nature preserver. He was very instrumental in helping the city acquire that property with his family. And so if you have a chance to go over, the tree is in the center near the bathrooms, and will be it'll be a farm that the family purchased, and we will have that. So it was beautiful, and we thank the city and the staff for going to great lengths to do that. He was my mentor, and many people felt very strongly about him, and I loved him. And I think it was a very small something to do for me, and he has such a big involvement in this community. Just to piggyback a little bit about the beach renourishment, and we are going to continue to look at avenues. I believe that the beginning of having a conversation with Congressman Chris was an opening of a door. I don't believe it was a lost opportunity. I believe that we will engage further with them, and trying to find positive in a situation that seems to have a lot of negatives at this time. And we mentioned in the newspaper the last time that, I don't take no very well, and we will continue to try to turn every stone as best we can, and to try to get beach renourishment to continue on our beaches in West Beach, not just us in Indian Shores. And one of the interesting things is Clearwater and one of the best ways I believe is Island Beach. They have gotten all their signatures, and I believe the Reddingtons have. So we're going to look at as many avenues. We have enlisted with us the head, Kelly Levy, who is the head of environmental. She's the director at Pinellas County, and so a lot of the information, since she's been involved with this project from the beginning, and also John Bishop, who has also been involved. They've been part of the conversations that we have done at different levels. So I'm just appreciative for them, and we'll just keep working as best we can with that. And again, Merry Christmas to everyone, and we look forward to a wild year, and we do have a lot to be thankful for in the Beach, I believe. With that, yes.
Which I apologize.
No,
together. One thing I did remember, Kathy Mack, as we all know her, over at Century 21, and pretty much across the park there. We'll be having her toy drive again this year, so please kind of be on the watch for that. She's still supporting, Grace House, the other charities, and our military families with those toys. Bikes were normally her thing. I don't think bikes are in order this year, but we already started to receive donations, DHOA has, from our local residents to buy toys for those kids. So please just stop by or watch out. I think we're going to do something to the same effect we did for the turkey drive for the food pantry. It was a fantastic success. At the drop-off locations throughout different restaurants here in Indian Rocks. So that's kind of.
Thank you, Joe. Diane Flag, Commissioner, do you have any comments you'd like to make tonight?
Well, I just wanted to thank the city and Matt for allowing me to participate on Zoom. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, and wish everybody a very happy holiday.
Okay, thank you. The comment from Dr. Maggie, do we want to discuss this at a later time? Do we want to discuss this, or What, do we have any thoughts on that?
Like a work session to discuss.
Yeah.
That's always fun.
All right. Any upcoming agenda, Greg, we could have a conversation about some of the comments about the magazine.
With the other.
With the other commissioners, how do you feel about that? Commissioner Black?
Yes, I'm in favor.
Thank you. With that, do we have any additions or deletions tonight? Hearing none, our consent agenda, we have no consent agenda. I don't think that's
I guess the minutes will come next.
Yes, we'll have minutes of the next meeting. And with that, we'll go to public hearing, 6A, quasi-judicial proceeding. And are you going to present the whole item tonight, or is Randy going to read it first? Would you like to? Okay.
All right, item 6A. Item 6A on the agenda is an alcoholic beverage designation application for the property at 8225. Oh, sorry, that's the address of 213 Gulf Boulevard, Indian Rocks Beach, Florida, 33785. This is a quasi-judicial hearing where you will consider the competent substantial evidence submitted to you for you tonight in the record and through testimony. Before we begin, has any member of this body had any ex parte communications with the applicant, that is, to talk to the applicant outside of this meeting about the relief requested herein?
No.
No.
Let the record reflect all responded in the negative. Has anybody here conducted a site visit for the limited purpose of evaluating the application before you this evening? This does not include driving by incidentally in a small community and peering out the window, but more specifically doing some investigative effort.
No.
Reflect all responding to negative. Before you proceed, will anybody who intends to offer any testimony on this matter please stand and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you are going to give this evening is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you very much. With that, Madam Clerk.
This is an application for a 4 COP SFS, which is the sale of beer, wine, and liquor on premises and off premises for location at 213 Gulf Boulevard, which is the old location of Arnold Park. And excuse me if I don't pronounce your last name right. Nicholas Raffani. He is the primary, he is the one that the alcoholic beverage will be able to use. They have entered into a commercial lease with Aqua Prime Real Estate LLC. The surrounding the businesses, the surrounding building is in business on the east side of Gulf Boulevard, with CT Commercial Tours on the west side of Gulf Boulevard. There's a single-story mixer building on the property, including an outside bar and patio area. The property is located within the business district tribal overlay zone. VIP, the establishment will be called VIP IRB Mexican American Cuisine, will have 110 interior seats and 40 exterior seats and 52 parking places. They have determined by the planning consultant that the application complies with Chapter 6, alcoholic beverages. The rear of the application by the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, for records maintained within the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, shows a criminal record for Nicholas Raffani, one is DUI, one is reckless driving. If this is approved, staff recommends that the following statement be added. With the following stipulations: repeated or instrumental use these activities and/or unlawful noise levels originating from the establishment or the parking area may result in revocation of an alcoholic beverage designation. You can see on the site plan in their application. They're not going to be serving in the, building first, they're gonna be using the outside bar area and the patio area to begin with. So in the beginning, there's not gonna be anything in the masonry business. In the masonry building, it's just gonna be the outside bar area and the patio area. And I'm sure the applicant can understand that. And that's pretty much all I have.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions for Deanne at this time? Any? Diane, do you have any questions for Deanne at this time?
No, not now, ma'am.
Okay. I think that we will bring up the applicant at this time. You will state your name and your address, and if you want to give us just kind of a scenario of what you intend to do.
Thank you. Nicholas Travisardi, 213 Gold Boulevard, Indian Rocks Beach, 3375. So just in short, well, just to clarify when it comes to the seating, we are going to have some seating inside. It's not going to be strictly to the outside. There is a bar that, the shutters open, there's a bar that seats inside and outside as well. We are coming from a place in Treasure Island that we see a maximum occupancy of 85. Inside and outside. We've had the restaurant since 1994, my family has. My mother and my father bought it. After I got out of college, after Dover, my father passed away, and I've been running it since then, since basically 2002. It's grown exponentially. We're exceeding the capacity of what we have right now. Shane Crawford, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the name, came to me. His CEO is Dale Schmidt, who was the owner of the property. Presented with the opportunity back in, I believe, February, and although we have a successful restaurant right now, there is need for more. There is a draw for more. And we've outgrown our space, and this particular opportunity was just screaming at me that this is the right thing to do. Forgive me because this is my first time doing this. I had coming out of school, to go to that restaurant, this is a whole new process to me, as far as, opening a new place, going through the whole licensing, and all that being considered. I feel like we're going to be a very big draw for the area. I love Indian Rocks Beach. I grew up in Seminole, lived in Seminole for 25 years, went to high school at Seminole High. I love all the beaches around here. What else? We would hope March at the very latest. If we can get all the staffing and everything goes well as far as licensing, obviously what we're doing today, everything falls into place correctly, we would like to be able to open in February. Probably March at the very latest would be the most feasible idea. We have affordable food, huge portions, a very different array of things than any other place offers when it comes to Mexican cuisine or American cuisine. We pride ourselves on what we do there. Really looking forward to being a part of this.
Is there any of the commissioners, do you have any questions at this time? Nick? Yes.
Yeah, does this include what was formerly known as the off-the-grid barbecue?
So, yeah, in the lease, we have use of the entire building, should we see fit to use it. Right now, the plans are, and Deanne, I have a revised drawing, I think I emailed you, I'm not sure if you got it, but I'm going to do one that, so I know I sent you like 4 different specs because the place is so large. I tried to compact it into one, I can give you that before, I think it's kind of expanding what we plan on using. Eventually, we would love to be able to expand into the entire restaurant, but if you really count the spots in there, like the seats, you're looking at upwards of 250 seats. Again, I'm coming from a place that inside and out serves 85. I don't want to go outside my realm of what I know right now, so we're going to start small and grow into it. We really want to gravitate upon the takeout aspect of it. Catering, the kitchen is very big. We're going from a kitchen that we're going from is probably the size of one of the stalls and one of the bathrooms at this current place right now. We have one fryer, we have one flat top, and typically on any Friday night, we have to take the phone off the hook and stop taking to-go orders. As far as the off-the-grid area, we probably look at that as more, if people need to wait while they're waiting for a table, they can sit out there and wait. Really have no plans other than that for it right now at this point. I know that Off the Grid they had 2 restaurants there, if I'm not mistaken. They had Off the Grid, they had Aqua Prime, they had cornhole tournaments and all kinds of stuff and jazz going on there. Right now, we just want to be able to make our tacos and burritos and margaritas and make people happy in the area that we're kind of looking at right now, and slowly, gradually move in towards the inside of the restaurant. It's nice. We've learned with COVID right now how valuable outdoor seating is, and having that area is great to know that we have it should we need it, as far as maybe people picking up takeout food and sit down and eating it with not necessarily serving people at those tables, but having that area because it allows for much safer social distancing and all the requirements from the CDC when it comes to COVID right now, because it's been a roller coaster this entire year for restaurants.
Just trying to make it simple for you.
That piece of property where Off the Grid was is not part of this application. That is a different address. And that address is not included within this application.
That's what I'm getting at exactly.
Those are whole
This is not trying to make your life easier.
Okay.
Later, so I don't, if this is prepared and it doesn't have the entirety of your leasehold, and you later wish to expand into that area that's not in here, you would be having to go through this process a second time. I don't know how that translates into the state licensing either, but.
So you're saying is there's an entirely different address for the Off the Grid portion of it?
Yes, has a different.
Your leasehold may have that in it, but this application as it presently is written does not include that. That's what Deanna is saying.
Right, and also the letter group that Aqua Prime Real Estate LLC gave us all these lists to one for the golf course.
Which sort of ends at where the community building ends. However, in this map where there's an outdoor hood shown, that's where they were serving the food from Off the Grid. So I want to encourage you to get this done. I also want to encourage you to get it done properly. And I would suggest that some of these drawings are hard to do, particularly if there's many of them. You may be doing yourself a disservice. I don't want to discourage you from getting a license. I'm just saying if you draw the drawings properly and make sure all the addresses are consistent with your lease, you would forego some potential future problems. I don't want to discourage you from that.
Right. I had no idea it was an entirely separate address for Off the Grid. So it's part of the same building, but it has a separate address as well.
Yeah, they were buying a different parcel. There's a whole long story in there, but yeah.
And more specifically, and my name is Randy Moore, I'm the city attorney. More specifically, what's being explained is as it relates to this process, you're seeking the blessing, if you will, of this commission to operate using alcohol. And the way, at least historically, it's been done, as it relates to that property, is that permission was given, and then they said, oh, we bought this lot next door, it's contiguous as part of it, but we need to extend the license. Okay, that's a separate blessing. And what Commissioner Hoofnagel is saying to you is, as framed, he really only asked for A, not A and B. And he just wants to make sure you're aware of that, because that may mean if you go into B, you'll have to come back all over again.
Okay.
Ultimately, how we proceed from here, if that information changes what you want to do tonight, that is entirely your decision. And what I mean by that is, proceed on what you got, get going, and if you need to come back, you'll do the motor mailing and you'll come back. Or you can say, you know what, I want to regroup, I voluntarily withdraw my application, and I'll come back another day once I've made heads or tails of this. I think is sort of what the commission is alluding to as another option for you. Ultimately, you are the applicant, you are the property owner, you are the individual who is seeking rights and seeking to assert their rights, and so that's your decision to make as to how you want to proceed. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot as you come up and said this is the first time you've done anything like this. We're not trying to make this a harder pop quiz than you signed up for. But I just want to make sure you have the information you need, in complete candor, now that additional information has been given you, so that you can make whatever decision you think best as the business owner.
So as it stands, this application only applies, so this application that we have right now applies to not that, not the offer video.
That's
just
based on how this was done historically.
Okay. And if we wanted to utilize that area for any reason, we would have to reapply for.
If you proceeded tonight in your current form, you would have to separately seek for that area.
Okay.
That's how it
Excuse me, Randy.
Yes, sir.
And also there's a state license, and I don't have any understanding of how that works.
Mm-hmm.
And our experience has been that the state, the EVP license, whatever it is, that's usually the thing that takes all longer to get approved in the city.
Right.
We're going to give you a hard time about noise and all that kind of stuff, because we want to make sure it complies with our quality of life. But there's other issues at the state level which is going to take a little bit longer. And so you may want to make sure your application with the state,
right.
If your intentions are later to be kind of a broader license, you might want to make sure you've got that in line.
Okay.
All of this comes with the asterisk. We can't give you legal advice.
Yeah.
That's your decision to make.
Right.
You've been given some information, sort of somewhat gratuitously in the interest of helping you. But ultimately, it's your decision. If you need to talk to somebody who you're here with as a business partner, investor, or something else, to regroup for a moment, I'm pretty confident the commission would entertain a brief recess for you to do so. If you just want to move ahead and you're comfortable, you've got a sense, that's fine too. It's your call, it's your decision, and you're at the helm of this.
What do you mean by decision saying?
Like, just, do you want to keep, knowing what you know now, does that change
As far as
anything you
the
have to do at this
offer,
time?
Okay.
Is really the question.
I have no clue, man.
Okay, so absent any official decision from the applicant, we would continue through the hearing. So if you have anything else you wish to add, feel free to do so. And if anybody has any other questions, we'll proceed as we ordinarily would.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
And is there anyone at this time who would like to come forward and state your name and your address?
I'm reading that. Good evening. My name's Lonnie Clinton. I live at 210 First Street. My property is just on the north side of this subject property. And I'd like to say I've always said that property would make a good place for a nice high-end Mexican restaurant, and here they come. So I hope they do well, and I look forward to a friendly, neighborly relationship unlike the last occupants of this property. I'm not sure if you guys are aware of it, but the notice that you sent to everybody, and the notice that is posted on the property, does not have the right legal description. Although the legal description in the application is correct. So, I wanted to bring up the point. Hello? As far as you were talking about the off-the-grid property, that's actually 208 First Street, that's lot 13.
Correct.
On the northwest corner of the property, of the bar, of the Aqua Prime building, that service window bar area that you can only access through lot 13, which is 208 First Street. Without including that property, I don't see how they're going to be able to utilize it. Because you can only go to that window by accessing 208 First Street property.
We'll have to figure that out.
Very good. Because the property line runs about a foot away from the building, actually. That's very close. Let's see, what else do I have? I had a question about parking. The statement in here on page 2 of the agenda memo states parking is shared with other tenants in this commercial plaza.
That was a mistake on my part.
Okay, they weren't sure of that. Also, in the application, it says there is 52 parking spots. The current layout of the parking spaces only has 42 parking spots, so I'm curious where the other 10 will be coming from. What about the new tenant at Lighthouse Buildings?
We're fetching our own interpretation.
Right. So Lighthouse Buildings now has new tenants. And I'm sure they won't be pleased sharing their 8 parking spots of VIP. And also, this drawing, what you say, is some other new ones. I think the outdoor seating shows like 62 seats on the drawing that he submitted. And he's claiming on the application there's only going to be 40 seats.
Thank you.
And that was just some questions I had. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. I was going to let the rest of the people talk back to you. Is there anyone else in the audience who'd like to speak at this time? Please come forward.
I want to speak so I can catch my mask off.
Okay.
Nancy Oborski, 708 Beach Trail. My question is, how does a prospective business owner in this town, and we should be applauding with the roof coming off, how does he get to this point before he discovers this? I mean, isn't there a process by which the city sits down with an applicant like this, looks at his lease, says, oh, wait a minute, you've got this and this in your lease, but your application, we don't have anybody that does that? So that this, I don't know how long it took him to get on this agenda. But now, if he decides not to move forward with what is obviously incorrect, he's got to come back, get back on the agenda. It affects him in terms of money. So, you know, in my time in Meteor Beach, I can't tell you the amount of times I've seen this happen. I mean, we really need to get it straight internally so that when somebody comes in for an application, there's a checklist. Somebody goes through and says, hey, wait a minute, how your stuff doesn't match up, so that he doesn't wait and come all the way in here and get this. I mean, it's kind of aggravating to see it happen over and over again, and nobody ever puts a system in that heads it off. So, thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Is there anyone who'd like to come for or against this? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing. Greg, is there anyone on Zoom that would like to speak on this application?
I have queried and there is no participation at this time.
Thank you.
Just a couple. The access to the side door and the front door, I don't think it's going to go properly to access the door.
Okay.
Good idea. Second thing is, they need parking. In fact, they will be sharing some parking because of the restaurant that's going on, going in the studio and shop. They're going to hold it in the that's the same way that they do. The third thing is, the town just know that somebody can act together. I don't know, maybe I talked to particular other examples of what this are. But if you look at the applicant's package, every drawing always shows the improvement on whether activity is going to be on the property that needless to further application on the with notice and all that.
Yes.
So it's also nice when there's a reference made on what you're going to do with the parking property that's pending drawing. So we're basing our view on what they submitted, and as Randy mentioned, just the application. If this business grows, we hope it does, so we're still trying to turn it on if you got 50 more. Yeah, hopefully, and they can come back and work on it. This last side in the second county is error. Now, maybe things reference the one that you sign on it, so as far as the application and what we act on, and this process is led by the city clerk, there's no errors here. If you can look through your own time and see what we reviewed, what what he asked. And we will gracefully accommodate him if he knows he's going to grow. And if he wants to serve quicker or want that property with a lot of alcohol, he'll come back to the alcohol that day. There's nothing wiggle there. There's no land use issue with him coming off the street and going across the property to use that door, because that's not used properly for restaurant or alcohol, what they're asking people. And that's the only thing that I was just reminded, that's one of the conditions considered that the top issue of whether grant and alcohol, everything else is administrative. But once again, played on more time, staff and including city clerk and city planner would be what the applicant submitted and it matches. You must control it matches. It's you as long as you select not in this application.
Thank you, Greg. Do any of the commissioners have any comments that they'd like to make?
I do want to, and I think it's true that you come up tonight because that's our goal as a deliberative body and as elected officials to say, is to make sure we're looking at the facts and circumstances and approving the license. And while the ability to walk on that lot is not an issue with respect to the alcohol license, were it to happen that tables and chairs were set up or people were milling about with beers and cocktails in their hands on that lot, that's where the licensing could become an issue. And I think what we need to do as a city is let the applicant know that should that come to pass, that that's something you want to have happen, there's a additional licensing you have to go through to get that to happen. That's why I said I don't want to distract you from getting this done, but there is a limitation in terms of what you're requesting. We're letting you know that in good faith, and I think that's pretty proactive of us. So contrary to what some of the fellow opinions said, I think it's good that we pick out those things and let you know that that's something that you have to address in the future.
Thank you, Commissioner Flagg, do you have any comments that you'd like to make?
Right now, Mayor, I was confused about that property too, but I think the city manager explained it correctly. So any granting of this license would not include that 208 property, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor, no comment. Mr. McCall, Commissioner?
No comment, this one.
Randy, do you want to add anything at this moment?
I have nothing to add, Madam Mayor, except to say the applicant should have an opportunity to provide any final words to statements that they should make.
Nick, if you'd like to come back up, do you have any other comments that you want to make before we?
And just to be clear as far as process, it's your application, so you get the last word. That's all this is. It's not getting called back to the.
Sure, I appreciate you guys being, helping me out with this. As it stands, if that's how it should be accepted, we won't serve alcohol. If we decide that we want to, as far as that 208 is it, the barbecue area, we'll follow up with something with that down the road and try to get that going. But right now, we're just really focusing on 213 in the restaurant, and that's about it. And I'll try my best to come in and be proactive with you guys and ask as many questions as I can and just help you hold my hand through this thing. And I'll speak with my attorney as much. I'm not going to insist on you guys walking me through this whole thing. I have people around me that should have directed me a little bit better. I wasn't aware of the I thought it was one. I guess I know it's separate lots and whatnot, but we'll figure it out. So I appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
You're a breath of fresh air. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the request for an alcoholic beverage use designation for COP-SFS for the establishment located at 213 North Boulevard with the following stipulation: repeated or intermittent nuisance activity and or unlawful noise levels originating from the establishment or the parking area may result in the revocation of the alcoholic beverage designation.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
our life. It's true.
Thank you, gentlemen. Ann, would you like to call the roll?
Commissioner Fine,
Yes.
Commissioner McCall,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hammond,
Yes.
Commissioner Kendall,
Yes.
Mayor Kennedy.
Yes, motion carries. We'll see you in February, not March. Did you hear me? Just kidding. You are free to go, and we wish you much success.
Thank you so
in
much.
Ross Beach. We look forward to you.
Appreciate it. Thank you all. Have a good night.
We are now at public hearing 6B, ordinance number 2020-09, public hearing. This is the second final reading. Randy, would you do us the honor of reading?
Happily, Madam Mayor. Ordinance number 2020-09, an ordinance of the City of Indian Rocks Beach, Florida, amending Chapter 74, Waterways, creating Article 4 to be entitled Leave No Trace, creating Section 74-100, purpose and title, creating Section 74-101, definitions, creating Section 74-102, digging holes on the beach, creating Section 74-103, obstructions on the beach and beach access areas prohibited, creating Section 74-104, exceptions, creating Section 74-105, permits, creating Section 74-106, fire prohibited, repealing Chapter 26, Environment, Article 5, Jump Director, Abandoned Property, Division 1, generally Section 26-131, confiscation of abandoned property, repealing Chapter 74, Waterways, Article 3, Beaches, Division 1, generally Section 74-65, tents, canopies, and volleyball nets, creating a leave no trace ordinance, prohibiting the leaving or abandoning of personal property on the city's beaches, prohibiting unfilled holes on the city's beaches, prohibiting the obstruction of the beach and beach access, providing for exceptions, providing for a permitting process, prohibiting fires on the beach, providing for legislative findings, and providing for an effective date thereof. This has been a second and final reading of ordinance number 2020-09, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Ned, would you like to present?
Yeah, but I'm talking fast. This is like recognition, this is the second reading. So basically, you talked about this in one session, you talked about this in the public meeting. The gist of this ordinance is you bring it to the meeting, you take it with you. If you don't take it with you, after 10 o'clock tonight, the city will legal authority to make around that beach and pick the stuff up and store it. One thing that I talked to Commissioner Hookdale about earlier, is you can't internally do 74-102
103.
I'm sorry, 74-103 D. If you go to the bottom of the paragraph, the rest of you deleted for the last thing, deleted some information out of it. And if you were written sentence with I say and continue on the next page, there's items 1, 2, 4 that are listed. And Ed had a really good idea of he always does. And that is what we wrote it, what I recommend to do is for clarity's sake, is we delete items 1 through 4. And instead of saying items 1 through 4, we would add some, they'll be right in the last paragraph. It would say, items of personal property shall not be left in the dry sand. And that's really what the board tries to say that different ways, but just for clarity's sake, we would say, I would repeat it again, items of personal property shall not be left on the dry sand. And that's just to make it as clean as we can, to bring it and take it with us. And we're not involving ourselves with anything else we do to our private property on the dry sand. So I think that was really good suggestion that when they just forward, just clearly say, if you leave on the, you can't leave them on the dry sand. I'll get to that.
Okay, so whoever makes the motion, that would be part of the motion.
And that's really almost a substantial change other than a couple of tweaks on it last time. So that's perfect.
Does anyone have any questions for the city manager or comments? Mr. Hall?
Just as we talked before, this was, last meeting was kind of late. We talked about a couple of meetings ago, like enforcing some of the fishing ordinances, that sort of thing. I guess one of my concerns is the part of this about prohibiting unfilled holes on the beach. I'm just trying to think. How are we gonna,
That's more of a traditional thing.
right,
We're not gonna, the reality of, we're not gonna do it for the person who's on the beach, and the family decides to stay and leave the beach, and go. So
that's what I'm thinking.
But there are things that are placed in ordinances sometimes to be more educational than enforcement. But we can be down there at the right time and have an opportunity to go there, whether or not, and you probably said that each side is how we will get going, well, 4 feet wide, 2 feet deep, and those kind of things, but, it's a standard, if the other ordinances we look into, it's a standard thing, kind of an additional thing to put in there. And the chance, it's kind of like having a litter ordinance. The only way that you can cite somebody for littering is if you literally do it, but it's boring, so I would address it that way, and I think Randy.
Yeah, I think when we look at these codes, I do think it's very, very prudent to give consideration. It is very prudent to give consideration to the issue of can we enforce what we're talking about. I also think, though, that it's important to keep mind of the discretionary element of will there ever be a situation where we may need to enforce this. Taking to its logical end, things like business tax receipts could be used to enforce against every little 6-year-old who sets up a lemonade stand on a hot day in August. Some communities have done that and rightfully been ridiculed for it. And said, well, to the letter of the rule, we apply it. Instead of, some kind of city manager edict just saying, yeah, not for that. Similarly, I don't think it is the intention, in fact, I know it was not the intention of the drafters putting this together, or the intention of your present composition of city administration to stand over every 6-year-old and say, this is the day that we teach you the lesson about Johnny Ball. However, I think you can all think of a situation, I grew up in the early 2000s TV, Bam and Jackass and all these sorts of shows where you just do something outlandish for attention's sake, right? So let's say somebody says, well, we've been taught to quarantine, I'm going to dig a hole and live in this hole for a week on the beach. And then they do that, they get their web likes, they walk away, when they leave, a giant excavated hole that they'd set up, to live for 2 nights. Now you actually have something to work, because then inevitably I get asked the question, what do we do? I don't know, they're digging on the beach. Is there anything about digging on beaches? I know it's tempting to say we don't need something for the outliers. But I would suggest to you that there are situations, and I think you can think of examples in your own community where you can say, hi, I never really thought anybody would do something like that. I'm not really sure what to do about it. Again, I would emphasize that's not within our, the spirit of this ordinance is preservation of the very valuable resource you have in your beaches. I think the public comment tonight bore that out as private property owners, but as well as members of this community. And I would just say that having something that says, hey, if you're really just tearing it up with no mind towards the maintenance or the way it may affect others, we want to be able to address that.
One of the things on that, in general, it's just Randy Whittaker, operator officer, is that, and I'll have to address it directly now, is that we have on at least 4 different pages here in some years out here with the same group of individuals that is trench dug, put plywood over, put sand on top, and it's pretty easy to figure out if we go on the internet. Okay. So that's another model that we have on that verification where that happens again, but this reality, unfortunately, didn't happen. But that's not things like that or in order to just sure to not put it in there, all about that, and actually the same location of it, trench, cover it, and we have no legal ability to do it.
And your point, I was thinking that more of, like you say, an educational situation instead of a rule that makes good sense, because as long as just take one patrons, like you said, chase little Johnny down the beach, and you both see it. Right? Fair enough. How's it for me?
Commissioner Black, do you have any comments at this time?
No, I don't, and I'm ready.
Okay. Matt, I'm gonna start with you, but is there anyone as far as on Zoom who'd like to speak at this time?
Madam Mayor, made several requests to the public to respond. I wanted, for the benefit of those who have joined afterwards, we now have 10 participants as opposed to 8. At the bottom of your screen, you're going to see a few options. You're going to see a chat button, a participants button, and as well as a more button with 3 dots. If you hit that more button with the 3 dots, you'll see the opportunity to raise your hand. We will then recognize you and just let you know you will have to unmute yourself, and that after you're recognized, please take your first and last name and your address. At this time, Madam Mayor, I see no participants. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll open the public comment. Is there anyone who'd like to come forward at this time? Please state your name. Mr. Howes.
That's pretty much what we felt. Okay, so I read this thing like 3 times, and obviously, really cool. There was a few things in there I really wasn't quite sure of. Where it says beach easement, it says no one is allowed to put anything there and leave it. So anyway, so it says where the beach easement is, no one's allowed to put anything there and leave at all, as if I read it. In other words, if a couple put their chairs in the beach easement part and went swimming, that would be illegal. Okay?
Randy, I'm not, sorry to interrupt you.
No.
You're not making a reference to a section of the ordinance, so I'm going to follow where you're. Thank you.
Like with last month, there must have been 5 weddings between 21st and 22nd at the beach easement, and they would.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. There's, to my reading, Randy, can you confirm, is there anything dealing with easement?
No, the beach accesses. I'm sorry, the beach access. Oh my God, I got easement on the brain.
Yeah, no, that's all right. Sorry. I think we all did this.
Sorry, John, go ahead.
The beach accesses. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay. Start the clock over, please. That's what the beach accesses. There, you can't put anything there and walk away from it at all. So, within the past, last month, there was a bunch of weddings between 21st and 22nd. They seem to like that area. So anyway, they set up stuff and all that and walk away from it. I'm assuming this might be the same thing as digging the holes just in case something happens. I don't know.
There's no prohibition of anybody leaving anything on the easement. The weddings are
Access.
That's something for the other side. And weddings are permitted through a different process through City Hall.
Okay. Well, and I actually talked to one of the people that was doing the wedding, and they said it was the reason they come here was that Clearwater got so bad about permits that they just come down here, they don't even pull a permit as long as it's less than 25 people.
But that's correct. If you're less than 50, it does not require.
Right. Okay. Good. So they're having weddings there that they're setting up stuff.
The access area is very narrowly defined in the ordinance. And it's mostly the boardwalks and the sidewalks and everything coming down to the boardwalks to get onto the beach.
So it's not the access, it's not the width of the access all the way out to the high water line.
No, it's the public beach access points in the city identified by the appropriate signage, including the boardwalks, walkways, and the dedicated parking areas, and the area on the beach beginning at the entrance, perpendicular with the applicable road right-of-way to the water's edge. So there would be a slice that would go down from the walkway to the water's edge.
So it's not the entire width of the entire permit.
No, it's that, there's some theoretical purposes.
Because the people that come and paint there, they might have done that, Sunset, and anyway, they set up a bunch of stuff there, just to try to make sure that we're all on the same page.
They also have a permit to do that.
Good, okay, all right. Nobody's hollering, I'm just trying to make sure that.
I appreciate it, Christina. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. Hey, information.
Yeah, and similarly, I would add, of course, the city's not taking the action of discouraging the inherent activities of other, the inherent elements of other activities that it's permitting. One of the issues this ordinance specifically sought to address, as I understand from management, is especially in the last year, people making a habit of sort of playing dibs with the beach. Dibs, my chair is here. And if we say, okay, you can't have anything on the beach, fine, dibs, I left it on the boardwalk and then I ran out at 5:30 in the morning because my stuff was already set up. And that's really what this is.
Oh, I do have a cell on the beach too.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to come up at this time?
And then he doesn't put the toilets down even.
I have really bad aim too, okay? I have really bad aim.
Nancy Obarski, 708 Beach Trail. I really do applaud your efforts here to try to clean up the beach. I mean, I see it every day behind my house with tents that people buy for $79 and just go home and leave it. I was also excited that you stated that you had no intention of protecting the beachfront owners' riparian rights. But then there's things I see in the text that go on, at least in my opinion, to do just that. And what I'm about to tell you, I know I can't ask the city attorney, so one of you is probably going to have to do the dirty work. The reference to the city's customary use ordinance, and I don't know how many of you remember that. It was done in 2018. It's 2018-03. I'm a little puzzled about that. Those of you who were involved in drafting this ordinance know that it was intended to preserve the public's use of the beach by relying on a long history of continuing use going all the way back, I think, to the Indians. It was a wonderful historical piece, actually. The problem with that, as I see it, is 3 days later, after you adopted yours, House Bill 631, which eventually became Florida Statute 163.035, it went on in effect and not in effect. It said the following: a governmental entity may not adopt or keep in effect, again it says may not adopt or keep in effect, an ordinance or rule that finds, determines, relies on, or is based upon customary use, or any portion of a beach above the mean high water line, etc., 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 unless such ordinance or rule is based on a judicial declaration affirming recreational customary use on such beach. So in addition to the requirement that it be ratified by a court of law, the affected property owners were supposed to have been notified by certified mail, neither of which happened in the case of your ordinance. I believe the city is still allowed to use this as an affirmative defense in litigation, but House Bill 631 says it cannot stay in effect. Yet it is referenced over and over again throughout this Leave No Trace ordinance. And instead of referring to the erosion control line like the Army Corps does, at least the erosion control line, you know, this is private property, this is public property. You described your line of demarcation as up to the line of permanent vegetation. And that line makes no distinction between what is private and what is public, like the term erosion control line does. Using an ambiguous term like that makes me nervous, and quite honestly, that's one of the reasons that the beachfront owners are reluctant to grant public use over our private land in perpetuity because of things like that. And I just can't imagine the chaos that's going to ensue when the sheriff tries to enforce this new ordinance and there is no definition of what's private and what's public. And so forth and so on. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who's in the audience tonight who would like to speak on this agenda item? Hearing none, is there anybody on Zoom?
No, Madam.
Thank you. We will close the public hearing. I'm looking for a motion and then, okay, go right ahead.
So Randy, I'm not seeing anything here about custom use. Where is it?
I don't believe if you can point me to an exact language, I know there was discussion at the last meeting of taking the language in sub D and aligning it with that language referencing the customary use ordinance. I don't believe that there's a specific invocation of the customary use ordinance here. I would also add the statutory provision cited respectfully has a great deal of nuance, ambiguity, and is wrought with problems. The same provision that would suggest that a community cannot do that without a judicial determination specifically states that it does not apply to a governmental entity with an ordinance or rule adopted in effect on or before January 1, 2016, and does not deprive a governmental entity from raising customary use in any proceeding challenging an ordinance or rule adopted before July 1, 2018, and that was the date before which adopted ours, and so there's a lot of legal wrangling about what the statute meant in the first place. But beyond that, in this particular ordinance, for the matter issue here, I don't see any reference to customary use specifically. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would make a motion to approve the ordinance if there's no further comment.
And is that including the late 1 through 4?
Yeah, if there was no comments, I was going to make the motion. Like,
well, if anyone has any comments, they can make those comments after the motion.
That's fair. Okay. So I would move to approve ordinance 2020-09 with the edits indicated by Mr. Mims, specifically 74-103D, eliminating subparts 1, 2, 3, and 4, and replacing it with the section that reads, no personal property may be left from the hours of 2 p.m. to 6 a.m. on the grassland.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. McCall. Is there any further comments for me to make for the segment?
I think there's issues which are always brought up, and we can't solve them all. I think this is a good attempt to embody what the will of the commission is, to help protect our city's beach from garbage. And that's really what this is.
We've had such a problem with that, the last few years.
But there are issues. I mean, there's always little issues.
Yes.
I think that the specific reference that we don't envision anything in here being able to restrict private property rights, I think that goes a long way towards addressing if there's anything unclear or maybe in conflict with the private property rights. I think you guys bring it to a nice job.
Thank you. At this time, the end of the call roll.
Commissioner Black?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Hare?
Yes.
Commissioner McCall?
Yes.
Commissioner Hilton?
Yes.
Mayor Kennedy?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you. We will move on to ordinance number 2020-10, which is agenda item 6C, public hearing and another second and final reading. Randy, would you read, please?
Happily, Madam Mayor, City of Indian Rocks Beach, ordinance number 2020-10, an ordinance of the City of Indian Rocks Beach, Florida, amending Chapter 38, Parks and Recreation, Article 2, Parks, Section 38-31, Park Hours, Special Events, amending Article 3, Skate Facilities, Section 38-51, Hours of Operation, amending Article 4, Nature Preserve, Division 1, Generally, Section 38-100, General, amending Division 2, Boardwalk, Section 38-116, Usage Regulations, amending Article 5, Keeping Clear Boat Docks, Section 38-40, Hours of Operation, amending the hours of operation of parks throughout the city, reserving repealed sections, providing for legislative findings, correcting certain errors, and providing for an effective date thereof. This has been a second and final reading of ordinance number 2020-10.
Thank you, Randy.
Just summarize what this is, also we talked about this at once, is Fifth Avenue Park, Brown Park, and Nature Reserve, if approved, would be open from 7 a.m. to dusk. Currently, the Nature Reserve is open well into the evening. That's happening. So it's a good thing for all. Within that same park, the boardwalk is also closed, obviously, at the same time. The Pekin Clare Park, the renovated park, starting there, the boat docks, our boat docks will be open from 7 to 11. Cole Park will be open from 7 to 9. And the only exception, I was providing in that is the lease that we have normally, they can do their activities until 10 o'clock. And then the skate facility now will be open 7 days a week from 10 a.m. to 9 p.m. So the biggest thing this ordinance is trying to accomplish, which fire and the staff part, was to flood the park that, like Brown Park, and making flood parks that there's no lights and there's not really nighttime activities. The track flows are resolved due to the issues that we have. I'll be happy to answer.
Ed, do you have any questions that you want to I know that you can see some.
Yeah, I've received a lot of correspondence from people who were abutting the pickleball courts, and they were asking that they felt it was not equitable for the skate facility to have a later start time than the pickleball courts, when the noise levels on those are arguably similar. I told them I'm bringing concerns to the body for discussion.
So at this time, what it is now is 7 a.m.?
Yeah, and the ordinance might value you could say.
I didn't just say, that's what it says. Yes.
Yeah, I don't say because I've had conversations with the federal commissioners, so I think the opportunity to look at area-wide, hills, county-wide, other cities, tennis pickleball courts to look at hours, and I can report back to you that there's no standard. St. Petersburg has another pickleball courts start 30 minutes before sunrise. There's some that start at 7, and I think the latest one I found was one complex that started at 9. One thing that's really different about the pickleball courts, the tennis courts that also allow pickleball, is a lot of these cities have pickleball tennis courts where they have a rec facility. So you go to the lobby, you check in, and some cities they require you to pay, or you can go to the court and get points. So that's different. Our tennis courts, pickleball courts, are in the open air, open to the public. As far as hours, it's like any other ordinance that you consider. That's up to y'all. Again, I want to say from an administrative standpoint that if the park opens at 7, which people are out early, I don't know if you get out there when people are out walking and out and about, is that you change we can fill it, you change the pickleball tennis court hours to a different hour, and what we're going to figure out staff-wise how to do that. And we can do it. We have to figure out whose house can get locked up at night, and who can have it, and staff it, and whatever time they'll say. But I hope when I did my quick review of hours, that there would be some consistent pattern in hours within everybody's consistent hours. So there's any commission set park hours, just like you set the hours for the state park, and this, all these things we're talking about, surely set. If you do it, you'll need to do it in the Cole Park. If you change the hours for pickleball, it's the Cole Park, you have to do it for the tennis court and pickleball, because they play pickleball on all the sports, so you have to be consistent with that. So I wish I could tell you that there's a trend, there's a common starting time for all over.
Commissioner White, do you have any comments as far as the hours?
Well, I think originally we talked about 7 a.m. because, you know, so many seniors are up and exercising and playing pickleball. They show up there at that time. And, you know, we start all of our trash pickup early. We do all the lawn maintenance in the park. You know, there are usually, if there are people playing pickleball at 7:30, you're also doing blowers and lawn mowers. And then we have other activities in that park a little later in the evening, with baseball and skate park. So do we give it one start time and then not the later time? I think it was an overall time that most people I talked to felt comfortable using, especially, you know, in the heat of the summer. You know, playing later hours isn't very conducive, especially if you're a senior and playing pickleball. But, you know, I'd like to hear the commission's opinions on that. We did one vote and so we talked about it before. This is the first reading, so, you know, I'll welcome everybody's comments.
Thank you, Commissioner White. Do any of the commissioners, do you have any thoughts about the letters, or you just basically, I know that John has sent several.
Yeah, no, I agree. I try to represent that group who's feeling that they don't have a voice.
Right.
So what they're saying is the skate park is being allowed to open later, and they don't feel that that's consistent. I think that personally, that probably benefit pickleball and exercise sort of outweighs that. But I told them I would represent the review. That's what I'm here to do. There's a group of people that are unhappy with it. And would like us to move it out. That's very hard.
And so that's my next question. What is the time that they, I thought it said 8 o'clock.
I get the feeling nothing is going to make anyone happy, but majority does, you know, that's kind of
The time has changed. A couple of years ago, it was 9 o'clock, it was 8:30, and the lights been printed out, and looking at emails from the same individuals, but now they're saying at least 8. So I think the latest time that out there is the commission saw that they're asking it not to be 8 o'clock.
Okay. Do any of the other commissioners, before we go out to the public? Okay. Is there any on the Zoom, is there any calls in that Ron would like to speak on this before I go out in the auditorium?
No, Madam Mayor.
At this time, is there any public comment on this issue?
Nancy Obarski, 708 Beach Trail. I really didn't have a dog in this hunt because I wasn't paying attention to what's going on. But the dog just reared its ugly head. Am I correct here in that you are not going to give parking permits to people who are not homesteaded here? Okay, that's not this.
That's a good one.
Okay, here you go. I'll come back.
Dr. Manning, do you have any comments to make on this? I know that you are an avid pickleballer, and I'd like to hear what you say.
Thank you. Thank you for having 101 question. I think I agree with Commissioner Flash that playing late in the morning, especially in the summer, may not be very visible, especially with, as you know, most of the players are seniors. So that's why many people come in at 7 and almost done by 9:30 the most. So I hear the complaint about the noise and the negative feel for the people who live around the park, but I also feel that, or I think that the city had went really far enough to put those parks around the north side and the west side of the forts, and then planted so many trees and shrubs around the forts as well to minimize the noise. As a player myself, if you play in summer, you have no ventilation through the forts because of those heavy parks. as a player myself, I have very hard time finding the balls when I lose them or if something goes over the fence. You go out, you try to find them, you always find black snakes more than balls. So I think the city, in my opinion, the city has gone far enough to accommodate the people living next to the park. And I hate to say it, if you live by a railroad, you know that you're living by the railroad and you're having trains coming across every 5 minutes. But if you live by a park, you know that it's a place where people can go out, play, have fun, and you have to choose where you want to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at this time? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing and we're looking for a motion. Is there anyone who'd like to make a motion? Do you make a motion? Okay.
Motion to approve 2020-10.
And is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Blythe, second. Is there any comments from the maker or the second?
No, I just think it's in Florida with everything being so close together, you got to kind of try to be respectful of others. And the only concern I thought about is now would be Diane brought up a good point about trash pickup and all kinds of noise starting at a certain time through the week. But if you really do anything, maybe a Sunday time frame might start an hour earlier or something like that.
Yes.
I would just like the record to reflect two responses. The first was that there was feeling from the people living around the pickleball court that when the argument was raised about we live near a railroad track, they lived there before the pickleball court was built, and so they're saying, we didn't know we were going to be living next to the railroad track. You guys wouldn't build the railroad track later. That's their point of view. The other point of view about the garbage trucks and the leaf blowers, they feel that those noises are intermittent and brief, whereas the noise emanating from the pickleball court is sustained over several hours in the morning and is more of a nuisance.
Thank you, Commissioner. You did a very good job. Okay, Deanne, let's call the roll.
No.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Motion carries. With that, we will move on to 7 other legislative matters. Ordinance number 2020-08. This is the first reading. Randy?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Ordinance number 2020-08. An ordinance of the City of Indian Rocks Beach, Florida, amending Chapter 62, Trafficking Vehicles, Article 2, Stopping, Standing, and Parking, increasing the fee for parking violations, restricting the hours of parking on city beach accesses, amending the requirements for securing a resident parking permit decal, specifying permissible uses of the resident decal, repealing the provisions for temporary guest parking permits, amending the fee for replacing a city-issued parking permit, and providing for severability and an effective date. This has been a first reading of ordinance number 2020-08 by title only, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Randy. Ray, could you present this? Thank you.
Let's go over what the important parts of this ordinance is. One thing that it does is increases parking fine now $40 to $75. And that's also, there used to be a little convoluted description of the wetland, and fine so much per axle, whatever. So we standardize that and make that the same video parking fine. And this is we'll wait for you to get back. That's what I used to do.
She's familiar with this.
Okay. Well, I might have some profound thing, but.
I'll stop you.
But really, okay, so I'll give you the critical things that this does, and what it does with it. Second thing it does is it brings clarity to who can receive a resident parking detail. And let me just say before we go any further that, if you want to pursue, and this is drafted for a workshop that we have, the way it's written, there's a pretty clear definition that in order for you to receive a resident detail, I believe that was the intent of the original when you saw that we interpreted as well right here, all that thing about it. But the way this is drafted is that the only individual that can receive a resident detail would be if you truly live there, and the ordinance spells out, and it's really what the standard of that, is that once the new cycle of decals is issued, and right now, because of the first set of reading, we will not issue new decals until February 1st next year. So all of the is that in order for you to wait script, in order for you to get a new decal, get a resident decal, you have to have a driver's license and a vehicle registration, because also the utility. Well, those actually being an IRS address. So to answer the question of Jim Barton, we talked about this now, we didn't decide we don't want. I'll issue as many details to as many people. Believe it or not, many people are talking a while ago that they for decals, and they think it is decals. But the way this is written is to be completed on the licensing. So that if you don't meet that criteria of registered vehicle or driver's license, you don't get a decal. And if you want to change it, you can say, you basically say, you're a resident, and it's language that you're about to do this property, and the reason why you need to consider this very seriously is on the east side of that boulevard, between the beach access, we've had 170 properties that have been converted from either traditional residential or duplexes to vacation homes. And you change the wording, and you say, if you're on property, you go to City Hall, and by the way, there's no limit on. Most of the people, you probably average 2 decals in the rest of it. We have some that 4,000 in next year. If you change the wording, and you allow for every property owner to get a decal, no offense. Every vacation rental owner in the residential area can take as many decals as they want. And I'll tell you, from an enforcement standpoint, I feel what's going to happen to them is they're going to leave them in the vacation rental. And although the ordinance says they can be permanently fixed, I think I mentioned last time, we took this off the back of the car. The current ordinance says it has to be permanently fixed. There's nothing magnet on the back of it. And this is a belongs to a person that lives like in a full front. And what we figured out is they got multiple one of these, and they all get passed around to friends and neighbors. So just to be clear, and I said, I'll issue as many as you want. If you want to get on job, that's what my concern is that you're probably going to be looking at the range and guessing on the best of the numbers that we issued this last 3-year cycle. With all these new vacation rentals, I would predict that it's probably going to be $4,000 or $5,000 or $5,000 number. Details. And if you remember my early presentation was I told you that we have 73 resident parking spaces. So if it's limited to just true residents, you're not going to be around 2,000, maybe a little less if there's any limit. But if you want to do it, you can do it. If you want to allow for these to be issued to all property owners, I just want you to know the reality. And the next thing is critically important. We talked about this before, but I just want to be perfectly clear about this, is that beach access. Beach access, and we've had, I think we told me we have 7 or 8 that were built with directly grant money. And then the rest of them were done by the city for various years. Beach access, whether they're pedestrian, but in this case, for the parking, those were built to provide parking for the beach. There's no record, there's no set by the city that they're not part of the grants. But the city built all these beach accesses to provide parking for cabins, vacation rentals, people that had cottages that had extra guests. And what this draft does, and there needs to be changes, I want to play out the side to you, is it says in there that no vehicles can park on beach access after 11 o'clock. And the reason why that's important is, you have to have a trigger to make somebody move the car. Because, COVID is kind of slowed this up, and I'm sorry I know this all the time, so it's really important to understand. COVID is kind of slowed this up, but we have, and I've seen it before, and a number of beach accesses, we have people that don't live on the beach, and they'll take their vehicle with a decal, maybe not a decal, but some will be close to the decal. And for whatever reason, they go park at beach access and they're legal there. And we have two vehicles that walk down in beach access, and I can tell you that are there about 90 to 25. And on the north end, they're on the 27th beach access. There's at least 4 or 5 vehicles that are there a lot. And we have a big problem with that is that people that live on the west side, you have golf carts, you have tags on that, so they can leave it out there in the street. Now they're parking those and waiting on it. So the part of this ordinance was that if you have a reason to park at a beach access after 11 o'clock, we can accommodate that by getting a special hang tag, come to City Hall. We'll probably, if you look at the ordinance, probably set up a video online and go on the hang tag, we can look that up. But if you're living in a condo, it's Christmas and your two kids are coming over and they got 3 cars, they can get a hang tag. And if you remember, in the existing ordinance, in fact, you look at the code, you'll see where it's struck. There was a second paragraph, and then she wrote in there, hang tag allowance. And that has been widely used, because there was no really guidance on who could get them, there was no guidance on how many they could get. And we literally, every time I go through a new figure cycle, we literally cycle up and do something. We literally have somebody that lives on, I don't think on Joe Street, so come to City Hall and say, I need 10 hang tags for the year. And there's nothing that people can do it. So when we have the work session, that's when we talk about taking that paragraph out and leaving the paragraph in that says, look, if you want to park on the beach access after 11 o'clock, you got companies understand that, but we want you to have a permit to do that, because that makes cars move. So we'll put the summary, the increasing the fine, the provision that what a true resident is, who gets the decals, if you change that, we'll issue one to every property owner to change it. And then the other thing that I've seen companies about is beach accesses and locking that park at the beach access after 11 o'clock. And she just fun in the spirit of, and I did it, she was fun in the spirit of, well, we have condos and we have one of the parks and that might be true. I don't think that was the reason why the city spent our city money required it. And we built at least 7 or 8 with state grant to provide public access, including residents, to go to the beach. Because if you don't make cars turn over, you're eating them really expensive. So, you know, I've taken the time, but I don't want to tell you, when we talk about the work sessions and stuff, we straight, is that that's what this says. And if you want to change it, we'll issue maybe 3,000 if you want to issue. But it's kind of just the 30,000 foot level.
So, we all got this one email on 23rd, and it's consistently about the overnight parking, and we have mentioned it. So, I just want to make sure that I'm super clear on this. So, when they're talking about the cars that are parked there as of right now, those don't have decals. They're just randomly parked there overnight.
They may or may not.
They may or may not.
Yeah, but even if somebody, that's the way the ordinance is currently written, even if there's so vaguely, so poorly written, even if you have a decal, people with decals are parking vehicles down there pretty long today. So this is another effort to clear this up where however y'all want to define it, it makes people move cars off the beach access. And one other thing, since you brought it up, because I think that was, I think I made a pretty more interesting kind of folks that had an issue coming to the city hall. A particular impact is that I saw an email when one of the email people persons made a comment about, well, we've been checking on beach accesses and we just don't see a lot of cars parked at night. Well, some of that has to do with normally have to tell you, and you shall figure out that the overwhelming majority of our Canadian guests are not here. There's some here that, so you probably off. But they're really making my point for me is that in the nighttime hours, at a certain hour, we're saying 1 o'clock. You have the need to, if there's no way you have the need to park car, there's some way we can accommodate you. We're just, I mean, this ordinance, we're not going to give out unlimited numbers of hang tags or whatever, even if people keep them for so that's.
So if you are in a condo, I'm just trying to be clear when I try to explain this to these, because they've written twice to all of us, okay?
Yeah,
And
it's what the record reflects is slippery people.
right. So they can get a decal because they live there year round under the new ordinance.
Yeah, that has to do with the provision in the.
Well, I mean, they're residents.
Is it, well, yeah. If they own the condo, they don't get to be a resident. If they own a condo, they still can, if they own that condo, they can still come to city hall.
Yeah, correct.
And that's covered under,
Okay.
so where it's about, it's covered under 62-35, and go over to
I guess the reason I'm asking this, Craig, is because what I don't understand is I'm not quite sure what the problem is, because if they get a decal, they can still park.
They want to park overnight.
Yeah, no, overnight.
The way this is written is, if this is adopted after 11 o'clock, if you have a decal or not, unless you have the special hand tag, you cannot park there.
But if they have the special hand tag, they can.
Right.
But that's for a limited amount of time.
Yeah, 3 days.
3 days, okay. All right, I just want to make sure I understand. All right, I get it now. All right. Commissioner Clyde, do you have anything that you want to ask at this time?
Just one question to Greg. The decals have always been handled in the past where you have to show your registration, license, and some type of proof of ownership when we went in to pick them up. Is that correct? Decals. That was.
I think the manager is pausing at your use of the word always.
Yeah.
Well, I'm saying that was the rule, not necessarily always followed. That
Well, and I appreciate the question. All I can stick to is the period of time I'm in here. For example, when I got here, they were issuing decals to golf carts that didn't have tags on them. There was a position independent of that. The existing ordinance had implies, you can read it, that decals are issued to residents. But the fact of the matter is, without playing the figure game or gotcha game, basically, you pretty easily walk in and get a decal if you were here for some period of time. That's I've kind of ratcheted up rules. For example, if somebody came in and said, well, I live in an apartment, they would automatically do one thing I did administratively is I put a requirement in before this ordinance was brought up that we would provide like a letter or about copies of the lease we wanted to. I put a year minimum requirement that you guys need here and here and here and get it. So to answer your question, Mr. Clyde, up until the last 3 or 4 years, they were giving out pretty freely.
So this decal is really a privilege for residents, and that's what we're going to try and restrict it to. So with the few parking spaces that are open, the residents would be able to use those parking decals to park in the beach access.
Well, obviously, if you did the math, if
I know.
your eyes are better, you know, the state out thing has been real educational for me. That's called City Hall, they're my city there where one gentleman in particular, several months ago, our resident went to the beach, forgot something, came back, and they was upset with his our resident. Hard to say, it's about another our resident. So that's why I stressed throughout all the work sessions, that we gave tonight, the value of an highly resident detail that is so valuable. What do you got? You know, not a good community.
Right.
Right.
Technically, Brad, how often could a resident go and get one of those hang tags?
Over the current system or
The new one.
they could just come whenever they want.
So there's no limit.
But
It's a pain in the neck. I mean, after 3 days, you have to.
yeah, and I would say administratively, because we adopted this, we have to go with that administrative policy. You know, if that were, if we had the same person that was coming in 12 times, then I think you're really going out of what's happening. It's like that, I could cut that off.
All right. Okay, any other questions at this time before we will go out to Matt and anyone on Zoom? Is anyone? Yes.
Just a couple things you mentioned, and like I said, I wasn't here when the grants were done. And you mentioned the grants, were those for resident-only parking?
But,
I mean, public parking?
in fact, you know, the same person that's maybe on the work, it was up about 2014, when we had a big beach thing, we talked about parking and winter and is it, one of the questions we asked the county and the state was that, because occasionally someone will bring up, why don't we just make all the beach parking restricted to our residents? And then somebody will bring up a thing, in fact, they did it, I think, in the last meeting, why don't we, put meters on the non-residents and don't put meters on the residents? They're not going to see that, because that parking is for everyone, and we really kind of squeezed out in 2014. In most of these accesses, we added a couple more spaces, I think, with the 4 now, 3 on the list of them. And we really just kind of hope across our fingers that
Yeah, I was just, I know you're worried about the rentals, and I completely understand where you're coming from there. I mean, is there any way you could, instead of just, like you say, issuing 10, you could just put a 2 per household?
Well,
you shouldn't need more than 2 cars to be able to get to, even if you're a resident.
I'm glad you brought that up as an anticipation of the discussion of who do you issue these to. I can tell you, unlike pickleball hours, if you take the time to look at cities that have used decals and they issue for residents, they're probably 80% of the cities on beaches, governments do, or maybe have another city exactly right. That would be about what we do. We wanted to issue them to property owners, their property owners. And that's what I actually consider to do, because this is because you have, there are some families that have 3 or 4 cars. That doesn't mean you need an ID decal on every car to be able to do it.
We're talking about beach access.
Yeah.
We're not talking about.
Yeah, so if you want that, I'm going to go into what you're going to. The commission vote to allow these issues to all property owners. I would ask for a further to the city. That would help greatly because we're still going to have
just real quick, this is kind of off topic, but under, just a little bit clarification under section 232-36, parking of house trailers. I'm not sure why this is in here.
That was in the existing ordinance. That's
6236 on page 5 to 7.
sometimes I wonder why certain divisions are placing certain ordinances. So that's the vision. Then this ordinance is not something we're changing. Okay. I will say that there's a couple of ordinances that either email or spoke or something like that. Last time I kind of got, we have our home picked up and we go out and all that. It's not a deal. That's not an issue.
So you're, I mean, because we saw on Sunday, or we saw it, right? Not that they were living out in the field.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. Then you get into a situation like we discussed for 2 years, that vacation loan, and now people with vacation loan. The same argument applies to say another home, driveway. They may have tolerance to it because they keep the freezer or refrigerator going. And if we get a complaint about somebody living in the living room, we have to prove that they're living in it. That's not, that's the
It's my question. Thanks.
Okay, Matt, is there anyone on Zoom who'd like to speak on this agenda item?
In a moment, I will unmute each speaker and turn the order shown in the Zoom window, allowing the speaker for 3 minutes, or the time as it can be modified by the mayor for all speakers. At this time, I'd like to recognize Katie. Please unmute your microphone and state your first and last name as well as your address, please.
Hi, Katie. Hi, Mayor Kennedy. I actually wrote my comment and sent it by chat. Perhaps Matt could read it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe Katie's the one that I mentioned in the email.
Okay, I apologize. I am not seeing your comment here. Would you mind reading it out, please?
Of course, I will. Mayor Kennedy and I are the commissioners. I was writing to you and asking you once again to reconsider the ban. I'm sorry to keep pestering, but some of us do need this overflow parking at night, and not always easy to do in advance. We need it mostly temporarily. Most of us do not use it. 3 days, very difficult though during COVID. My daughter is an IRB resident. She's a college student at UF. She has had to leave UF 3 times, almost immediately since March 2020 due to different COVID mandates. My neighbor is a guardian of a special needs woman who's living with her during the pandemic. He drives her to cancer treatment in her handicapped van, which he has to park in his spot and then put his car. He's also a long-time resident. We occasionally receive last-minute parking. It's not always feasible. It's not even safe for some of these people to come into City Hall during the Hooligan 3-night pass. We definitely try to borrow parking from neighbors, but it can't always be worked out. I'm sure there are others in similar situations during COVID that have these situations. We are a good community and wonderful community. These parkers, most of these parkers are our neighbors and friends. They have resident decals. I've looked around, I've looked at this. We have very few that really park at night, at least in the top northernmost 7 beach accesses. And I feel like we could work better on a better solution that completely manage only overflow parking and needed the residents. So anyways, I wanted to give you my circumstance so that you could understand that, let you know what we've done during the day and at night to juggle around our parking, and we just appreciate you considering our concerns and considering this work. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else on Zoom?
No, madam.
Before, Greg, is there, I'm just, there are special circumstances.
There are special circumstances, and that's why the provision in the proposed ordinance for somebody to get a hang of that. And if it's something after hours, that would be like any situation that any of us would have. If I'm going to pick up the empty table for a second. If there's a Fifth Avenue beach access, pedestrian driveway, he has a light, he didn't driveway, he didn't have two primary vehicles, they squeeze those cars up. If Dan has gas stickers and vehicles, Dan has to find a way to accommodate it. It's not the city's position to accommodate people's professional circumstances, it's not. And also in the same email, there was a discussion about, well, just don't have any rules, and then the city was talking to people about it. I don't know if y'all ever tried to enforce a city code or not. I have for about 40 years. I would say it flat out, that, if there's not a rule that says you can't park, whatever hours you want to park there, most will look at you and tell you, I can let you park there. Typically, they have a decal. Let's say I have a decal on the front there. So, I get what the concern is, but there are special circumstances, and just like Dan may have an issue with his house with extra vehicle, I don't think it's the city's obligation to resolve that kind of issue. Because you can allow for there to be no rules and just like in the park, but it's kind of defeat the purpose. We hear complaints about it all the time about what happened on the parking lot. When all the Canadians are here, will live and tourism, and hopefully we'll get back to that sometime soon. The beach access parking is a critical thing for residents and other taxpayers.
Actually, just a procedural matter, we're at 9:29, beyond 9 o'clock, and it was a procedure to take it, need a motion to continue beyond 9:30. Is there a motion? So moved. Is there a second? Second. All in favor? All right. Thank you. Apology for the procedural interruption.
With that, is there any other questions? I'd like to go out to the auditorium to see if there's anyone who wants to speak at this time. All the public discussion, Nancy.
Thank you. Nancy Zaborski, 708 Beach Trail, where I have a horrible parking situation for those of you who have seen my house. So let me give you a scenario. The unit, I'm in a duplex, I'm in Unit B. Unit A is 2 cancer surgeons from Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York. They live in Manhattan. They pay $22,500 in property taxes every year, and you're not going to give them a parking permit. I mean, that's the bottom line here. And I don't know about Greg's situation with the rentals. I mean, that's a whole nother conundrum that I don't know how you solve that. I mean, I understand what the problem is, but fact is, we're taking a lot of our part-time residents that we welcome with open arms and really just kicking them to the curb and saying, no, you can't have a parking permit. The other thing I hear you saying is this is to accommodate public parking. So we built all these beach accesses and we did all this stuff. Guess what? To get sand. Now we're not going to get any sand. So I don't know why we're being as accommodating to the public. And, maybe the county's driving a bus on this. But the county's not going to pick up the 60% that the feds aren't going to pay on it. So why are we taking residents paying property owners paying $22,500 in property taxes and giving preference to public that doesn't necessarily live in Indian Rocks Beach for a reason that doesn't exist anymore if we're not going to get sand? It's just something to think about. My situation is where I live. There are times when I have workmen there that I move my cars, both of them sometimes, down to the beach access. And, and we try not to abuse it. The 8th Avenue access where I live, we don't have problems like this. So I don't know if it's possible to put that overnight situation in on the accesses where you are having problems. I mean, when you go down to downtown St. Pete, you got a couple of 2-hour free spots next to, metered spots. So I don't think that there would be anything wrong with it as long as The signage is good. So here then the access is at the north end of town, is where it seems to be a problem, restricted overnight, but, you know, you can go on that 8 a.m. access. I've never seen a problem down there. And sometimes it's tough. I mean, I'll move my cars down there and, you know, if I, for some reason, can't go down and get it, I'll go back and get it in the morning, but obviously I'm not going to be able to do that. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak at this time?
I used to be a man.
Okay. So, I'm 21 for Detroit. When I was reading this thing, maybe clarification, it seemed like the tags were $5 a night. Did I read that right? The hang tags were $5 a night. Was I reading that right?
Finish all the rest of it.
Oh, okay. Because I've never even got a permit. Because we never had a problem, or had never. We've been able to stack them up because our neighbor hardly ever comes and uses his garage. But if we do have a problem and we do need a place, if my son comes down for a week, because they've been doing that, and we do need to be there, the hang tag is a specific, let's say I got a hang tag for my house. Is it specific just for a particular vehicle or for any vehicle that I might have to hang and use at that particular time? And is it $5 a night?
Thank you. I'm going to close the public hearing. And Greg, would you like to answer some of the questions?
Sure. The hang tag would be specific to the individual that requested it. So if you're a town that has as long as they have the hang tag and they are program, that gives a $5 per night fee. And I guess one other thing I would argue that it gets back to the issue that seems to be getting more issues is that you can admit this where you can allow this for the overnight part, you can allow people with hourly emails going to park there. That's not going to be as clean as you think it's going to be. So there are already people parking over there that don't live over there. They live on Harvard Drive. They don't live on Lincoln. It's goes back to a beach access and beach access. And you have to do something to make the cars turn over. And the way turn over is notice. So bad and no doesn't do that. So are there any circumstances where if the speaker gives permission or has some emergency that unless I could have sure that we all have a situation that you can't find a way to do it. And all I think is all the respect for people paying taxes, and we appreciate everybody paying taxes. That's why I'm working a number of years is that if somebody has a $22,000 a year tax bill, that's not going to the city. We have to run about 12% of that. So all taxpayers are important. I discount that. And two, on the tax is that people pay taxes for a variety of things. Public safety, parks, beaches, direct facilities, kind of get on the mountain. It's not a big deal. I get it. I mean, I'll think it's important. That's why I told you in the beginning, I was inside the detail. Clearly, other authorities are saying to this tonight, and saying where clearly saying to a property owner, we produce evidence of that, what we do all property owners. I think I'll back to what Joe said earlier, you got that route. I was requesting to put that on. There's absolutely no need for a multi-vehicle home to have a detail on it.
I guess I don't understand on the overnight, why would, unless you were right there on the call, why would someone who's not on the call need overnight stay there?
For the same reason you've heard in the public comment, any random situation that may tap you out of your personal property. If you have a single
car drive, single width driveway that can accommodate 2 cars, and you have 2, and then 2 people visiting in cars. Now you're in search of overflow, and some people have used that beach access space with the resident depot as a means of accommodating overflow.
We have others have a business now, you know, all these skills. There's a particular bird truck that parks at least access, and that's why he's down there, why it's expected to be some problem. It's just out the kind of a big strip. Yeah, they have the need for parking, everybody has something we can do.
Is looking for a motion?
Motion to approve ordinance 2020 dash X, hold on a second.
2010.
Dash, wait.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I would like to thank Helen. Nathan.
Okay.
I was not 100% comfortable with the restricting of the beach access parking because I know how important it is sometimes to have to park a car overnight at beach access. But I think that the larger issue here is if you're having to find a parking spot, we've basically abandoned controlling parking. I don't think that's intended the way that came out. Thank you. We made a decision as a commission last meeting to deny an ordinance which would have greatly reduced parking east of Gulf Boulevard, so that opens up a plethora of spots that one can go and find and use. Now, because we decided to not require there to be a parking sticker to park east of Gulf Boulevard, so I think that alleviates some of the problem here. I understand the sensitivity to taxpayers and property owners, but this is a resident parking permit. It's clear, it's designed for residents. Does that mean that someone who owns property won't get a park permit for their, a couple times a year? Yes, they're not a resident, they don't get a resident pass. I don't think that's insulting, it's just recognizing that this is designed to address the quality of life of the resident, not the property owner. So I support this, even though originally it has been to
Diane? You second? Do you have any comments?
I just think the comment is, years ago we structured these decals and the hang tags for the benefit of residents, and we defined the parameters, but through the years it became apparent that the rules weren't actually followed, and it got overused and overabused. So I think our city needs help with some structure, and if we want to have a chance for proper enforcement, something they can handle and our police department can handle, I think this ordinance is necessary.
Commissioner Paul? Any comments before we take the roll?
Yeah, just briefly, I have to say I don't necessarily agree with the resident component of this. Second homeowners are a vital part of our community, a vital part of our economy. I know we're dealing with the proliferation of vacation rentals, which is a whole thing we have to deal with. It's not going away. If I need a second home here and I paid $1 million, I would surely feel that I have the right as a property owner to access the beach that I just spent my money on. I feel that we are a very accommodating city. We're a very friendly city. Our Canadian friends and our northern friends that may not have cars here, but obviously come here, 4 to 6 months out of the year. It should be a little more common. That's just my opinion.
I want to make another comment. Can I make a comment?
Yes,
I just want to say that I know some people that are not full-time residents, but they, without the parking ordinance being passed from the city streets, they park their overflow in their cars on the public streets, all other public streets that have parking zones. So it's not like it's prohibited in the city, just on the few spots that are on public beach accesses. That's all the decal is really for, nothing else.
And just in my comment, those are, as Greg said, it's almost there's a black market for this. Those are premium spaces to unload your family's wares to go to the beach. So I do agree. We did open up other spaces in the city to park for everyone. So in that particular case, these are premium spaces for the city to access the beach. For all, in my opinion.
Vice Mayor?
Another tough one. I agree with what Ed said, and certainly understand Joe's position as well. But the biggest thing, as I see this thing, is the abuse of extra parking that people have. There are folks that say, I got extra cars to leave at the beach. It's not 4,000 people living in Rock Beach's responsibility to accommodate this other person who needs an extra parking spot. And that does not feel right. I'm sensitive, especially to the lady that spoke, Katie, about the daughter and the issues of medical attention. Probably that's why we had 2 readings on this thing. We'll get a chance to maybe hear some additional input. We'll be able to distill this down to something that's very workable.
Tina, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Paul?
No.
Vice Mayor Hill?
Yes.
Commissioner Clyde?
Yes.
Commissioner Woodfield?
Yes.
Mayor Kennedy?
With hesitation, I agree with this. Motion carries. We are now at our work session items. We have none. Is there any other business to come before the board tonight? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn? For a second? Motion carries. Thank you. May all of you have a great holiday and take care of yourselves. Be healthy and stay safe. Thank you.
You too.
Yeah.